The following is a presentation of the Six Arrows Radio Network.
It's the Ham Radio 360 podcast, special edition shopping show coming up. Hey friends, welcome back into the Ham Radio 360 podcast. My name's Cale, K4CDN. That's Kilo 4 Charlie Delta November. If this is your very first time, well, welcome in. We've got a huge back catalog of shows that we'd like to invite you to listen to after you take this one in. I'm on vacation. I'm not supposed to be around till the first of the year, but I did not want to let the shopping season pass us by without creating for you our fourth annual shopping show. Now, us and we, I'm talking George and Jeremy from the Workbench Show, as well as John from the Field Radio Podcast. We're all here, and we're going to talk Handi-talkies. We're going to talk mobile radios, HF radios, whether we're talking in your car, in your backpack, on the park bench, or wherever. We're talking about all those things, as well as cool accessories, things that you may have forgotten that you even needed, or how about a great list of stocking stuffers. The coolest thing about it is, go to the website, hamradio360.com. The podcast will be listed there, as well as in the show notes, everything we talk about in the order that it's discussed. Links to manufacturers, Amazon, different shops and whatnot for you to get this gear in your shack this holiday season. So thank you for the opportunity to be here. Thank you again to George and Jeremy and John for coming in and hanging out with me as well. Hope you enjoy this. It's about 2.5 hours or so long, so get ready. But hey, you're probably still hungover on turkey, so take it all in. I'll be back in a little while. We'll catch up then. All right, welcome into the very special shopping show episode here of Ham Radio 360 Podcast. Kel Nelson, K4CDN, dropping back in, sliding down the chimney for the shopping show for 2017-2018 with us. In this call, this conversation, really, it's more than a call. We've got some friends that you will recognize. We have George, KJ6VU. Hey, George, how are you?
Kale, I'm doing great. How are you?
Doing good, man. Welcome into Ham Radio 360 Podcast Special Super Edition Shopping Show. Don't ask me.
It's nice to be here.
Don't ask me to say that again. I'll mess it up. Jeremy, KF7IJZ, George's co-host from the Workbench Podcast. Jeremy, welcome in. Good to hear you.
Well, good to hear you. Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. And not to be left out, but on assignment nonetheless, John Jacobs, W7DBO. John, where are you at? And welcome to the podcast.
Greetings. I am in the beautiful town of Pahrump, Nevada.
Well, I've never heard
north
of that.
of Las Vegas.
Okay.
Yeah, right next to Area 57 or 51.
Are you there going to visit W6OBB?
He is in town. I should go try and find him.
You should. You should stop by and get a QSL card.
Excellent, excellent. Well, welcome in, guys. This is something we've done for the last, I think this will be our 4th year, so this would be the last 4 years we've done this. And this is our opportunity to try to convince other amateur radio operators to spend their hard-earned money, but at the same time help them make some good decisions with those purchases. And we were kind of talking just a few minutes before we got the show started here. One of the things we want to do is not be a repeat of the last programs that we produced for you, but we did want to kind of give you some insight into some of the things that we're thinking about regarding amateur radio and purchases coming up in the new year. Now, I'll be very, very just open here with you guys. I've spent the majority of my day looking at Amazon I've been asked, hey, Kel, what can we get you for Christmas? Your birthday's coming up, whatever. And I'm having a hard time because I don't know if I'm just happy right now and don't need anything else. And, of course, Amazon's maybe not the best place to shop, but I'm having some trouble coming up with some great ideas. So this may help me. This show actually may help me some personally as we get nearer the holiday season. So you guys ready to get started?
You bet.
Let's do it.
All right. Well, one of the things that when it's going to happen, when people get excited about the amateur radio hobby, or maybe they get licensed right off, the very first thing they think they want to do is to buy a Handi-talkie, or as Kel likes to call it, a walkie-talkie. And, that, of course, that'll get you in trouble. Don't call it that around anybody. But anyway, of course, a lot of people go for the cheaper Chinese Handi-talkies from Amazon. There's no need to talk about those. Everybody has them. You know what they are. But a good quality Handi-talkie doesn't have to cost $300, $400, $500. I've got a great example of one that doesn't, but it may not fulfill your needs. So I want to just kick it to you guys and say, just tell me what you would look for in your first Handi-talkie that wasn't the $35 import. Of course, they're all imported. And what would be some of the reasonings behind that, Jeremy?
Well, I've said time and time and time again that so my first Handi-talkie was the venerable Yaesu FT60. It is a dual band but single receive radio. It's bulletproof. It runs off AA's. It's come down in price quite a bit. They're available for about $150 to $160. But the challenge with these radios is that they are end of life. They have been replaced by the Yaesu FT65. You can still find these at many of the online retailers, but my guess is this holiday season may be one of the last times they are available. But as a good rugged entry into the hobby with a quality radio designed for purpose for amateur use, I don't think you can go wrong with the FT60. Now, I will add one more thing. We've covered digital modes and D-Star and DMR and System Fusion, all these different ways. And I think we should talk a little bit about digital modes here in a minute. But another radio that is a fantastic radio, if you can find one, and it is also a radio that is no longer made. And this is another radio that I have owned and regret getting rid of. This is an ICOM radio that was a D-Star radio. It is the IC92AD. And whether you have D-Star in your area or not, it was also just a fantastic handheld HT for analog. It was a dual band, dual receive radio, and it was rugged as could be, very simple to use. The battery life was fantastic, and that's not even mentioning anything with the D-Star.
Yeah, and I'm a huge fan of dual band, dual receive, dual VFO, however you want to describe it. I'm spoiled like that, so that's a very good recommendation. I'm actually going to write that down because I'd like to have a little higher grade dual bander. George, we know that you're a Kenwood fan, but you also have some others around there. What are some? What would be your pick on a? It doesn't have to be ultra top shelf, but it does have to, have some amateur amateur radio leanings toward it instead of just hey, we use these in the factory over here. Let's put them on the boat and send them to America. My picks are pretty split between fairly inexpensive and expensive. So I think at the more inexpensive end, I think the Ocean radios are great. The KG UV3D is one that I've bought. I've got a few of them, like one in every car, one in my go bag. They're $100. They're like $99.95. And at that price point, they're every bit as good in terms of raw performance as the $300 Japanese radios, in my opinion. And I came to that conclusion reluctantly because I used to give my buddies a hard time about this junky radio until I went out and bought one. And the more I used it, the more I realized it was actually a very decent radio. It doesn't quite have as nice of a user interface as the more expensive radios. It's analog only. Some of the buttons are kind of a weird combination of buttons to get it to do what you want. But if you can forgive those kind of odd aspects of the radio, it's really good. And it's way better than a $30 Bofang radio. The $30 Bofangs have their place. We won't say what that place is exactly at this point. Actually, I have a suggestion for a Bofang later in the show. But as let's say even your first HT, I would spring the $100 and not get the Bofang because it's a way better radio. If I were going to go up from there, I agree on the FT60 and its replacement. I think that's a very nice radio. And if I were to go beyond that, then you sort of get into the analog and digital radios. The Kenwood radio I liked a lot was the THF-6A, but that's been discontinued. So there's really not a great replacement for that. But in that kind of $300 price range, you're starting to get into the analog and digital mixed mode radios like the ICOM
ID51 series or the I forget the Yaesu. It's not the FT1, maybe FT2 or something like that. They have a fancy one and a not so fancy one, and those seem pretty decent. So I'm pretty split. $100 or $300 is kind of the next jump for me.
Yeah. I've had great success with the Oshin, or I think Richard calls them Wuxon. But if you're wondering what we're talking about, it's it used to be the cheap Handy when I got in. That was as cheap as you could get, and I think I've got 6 of them now in all different flavors. 220, 6-meter, dual band. My boys are studying for their license. I bought them 2 used. They were virtually brand new. 3 Delta? Yeah, the 3 Deltas. So they're in the box waiting on them to get their tickets. So been really pleased with those. I mean, they're really, and I've just, here lately, I've been really working mine hard. My original, still use it with the signal antenna that John can tell us about later. But anyway, John, speaking of John, John's over here waiting for us. John, what are some of your thoughts regarding Handi-talkies for somebody getting into the hobby that wants to spend more than $30 to get some good performance?
Well, what I did is I had a radio for about 15 years, an old Kenwood, and yeah, I've got all the Bale things, but finally I decided, you talked about, you did a show on having your second radio, or your second radio being the one, making the purchase. So I held out after hearing about the new Kenwood THD74A, and I got it, and I have to say I have buyer's remorse on that item. I'm just not. It stays on the shelf more than it goes in the field because I know how much it cost. The battery life, I'm not seeing. I understand I need to do some upgrades on the battery, but I'm just not seeing. And D-Star's not really working out that well with it. So I would say. And they're getting cheaper now because the THD72A gives you that APRS, doesn't give you the D-Star. But like I said, I don't think Kenwood really implemented D-Star that well on that. It's not as smooth as I hear everybody talking about the ICOMs. It's still kind of a programming a whole bunch of channels to activate your repeaters. And it didn't have the dual receive, and so if you're looking to talk to the satellites, everybody's saying go back to the old Kenwood that you can actually monitor on the other band while you're transmitting, and that was one thing they left out of that D74A.
Yeah, and
so
I just
say, go ahead, Jeremy.
I want to clarify one thing about that. It is dual receive. What it is not is it is not full duplex.
Correct.
So you can't receive while you're talking.
Yeah,
well, I don't think any of the Handi-talkies will let you do that.
Yeah, I think it was the D7, the predecessor to the D72, if I remember correctly, was a full duplex. And then there might have been an ICOM, because like if you know folks who are really into satellite, like some of these radios that were full duplex Handi-talkies were very much desired.
Yeah, so I would say maybe not get that, the top of the shelf one.
Yeah.
Dial back a little bit. Like I said, I think most of it's just mental on how much it is, and you don't want to ruggedize it.
Right. I got you. Well, here's my favorite. It's the most simplistic radio that I own, but it's my absolute favorite, and I go to it if the Oshin is somewhere else, and that's the Kenwood Shocker. There, it's a T. I'm trying to read this on the box up here. THK20 Alpha, THK20 Alpha. It's a 2-meter radio only, and it's a 5.5 watt transmitter with low power as well. Comes with must be a very good antenna from the factory because the thing just talks all over the place. And I actually bought mine open box from MTC back when, had less than $100 in it, and it is really, out of everything I own, it is my personal favorite radio. I'm talking, the HF rigs, everything involved. That little 2-meter only handheld is my favorite radio. It's so simple to use. It works every time, and it sounds great. So if you don't need dual banding, consider that one for sure. But I'll have to echo George on the Oshin or the Wuxon or however you want to say it, as those have been very good performers for me as well. So
I've got a question about those real quick.
Which one?
So the Oshins.
Okay.
So at Dayton a couple years ago, Richard from Main Trading Company, gave me a fantastic deal on the, is it like the 8E, the one that was the tri-band with the built-in crossband repeat? Yep. So I agree with everything you guys are saying about the radios. I think that they punch way above their weight. I think they're better than their price would have any reason to let you believe they are. They're even relatively easy to figure out with a little bit of studying from the keypad. Like I would say it's no more complicated than picking up a modern Kenwood or Yaesu or whatnot. But I have had absolutely terrible luck with the batteries.
That's like I don't. It may be because it's a different series radio. That's why the ones that George and I are talking about are the original Oshins that don't have the pretty big display like the one you do. It's got just a 2-line display, and I don't know if that affects it or not. But I haven't heard that. But I've never owned one of those models either, so I can't.
Funny thing is, I had one of those KG UV8s. And I actually like the UV3 better. And I can't really tell you why, because the display is not as nice. Well, it's similar kind of display, but it's smaller. And anyway, a friend of mine got licensed, and so I gave him my UV8 as a congratulations present. And I didn't miss it at all. I actually like the UV3 better. And I'm not quite sure if it's any different performance wise. And I've never really had a big battery problem. There are 2 different battery sizes you can get for the UV3. There's a I don't remember the exact capacity,
There's
but like
17 and a 30 something.
Yeah, exactly. And it comes with a smaller one, of course, which is not bad. And then I got one of the bigger ones. I really haven't had much of a battery life problem, but maybe I just haven't been in the same situation.
Well, then I want to be clear. Like the issue that I've had, I had 2 of the high capacity batteries for the my 8, which I think, like Cale, I think you said it's like 3,000 or 3,200 milliamp hours. Yeah. And both of those high capacity batteries, the batteries themselves failed it. I'm not talking about battery life of the radio. The batteries themselves just failed after anywhere from 3 to 5 months. And so again, the radio, that radio is it's storming and I want to listen to the repeater for the Skywarn nets. That's my go-to radio here in the house. So I was just curious about that because I do think the equipment is really good. And, John, on your podcast, you were recently, when you were doing the episode about the repeater in a can, these radios also have an accessory available for them called a battery eliminator, which is basically a plastic case that plugs into the back of the radio in place of the battery and gives you a 12-volt cigarette lighter socket, so you can run them straight off 12-volt as well.
Yeah, exactly. And I have those, one is none kind of an idea with those. So I try to keep those handy for all of mine. And George, I also have a 1D, and I think I have some 6Ds as well. So I might even have a 2D in there. What I'm trying to convey here to the listener is there's multiple D Oshin Wuxon radios, and they're all about the same thing. Some may be a little later vintage or whatnot, but they all kind of look the same. And we've had some pretty good luck with them. John, when you buy a Handi-talkie, do you add those like Jeremy's talking about? Do you keep those with you when you're out traveling and whatnot, or even in the glove compartment for your battery eliminators for your Handys?
Yeah, so I have kind of a stock whenever I get an HT. I make sure I have several things. First of all, I get a second of whatever battery it is. And then also, especially with some of the Chicom stuff now, you can get a DC plug for the base charger, but you can also get a USB plug that goes into the base charger. Mm-hmm. So I always make sure I have some type of way of DC charging from the cradle. That way I don't have to kind of mess with plugging it in the radio. The DC clamshell to replace that so you can plug it into pretty much anything that has power. You're going to find a lot of anything pretty much is going to have power for you, from car batteries to field batteries. And then also the replacement, so you can put in AA or AAA batteries. That's always an item I get. And then I always replace the dummy load antenna that comes on those.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we would expect to hear from you in the field radio show is having those things in case you need them, whether you're out of the shack or out in the middle of nowhere, is to make sure you have those extra things. And really, honestly, when you purchase these items, you should just, if you can, go ahead and put those in your cart at the same time, so you'll have them. You know how to use them, and you don't have to say, man, I wish I'd have ordered that. It takes another 3 or 4 days to get it or whatever.
And then another $10 in shipping for a $20 accessory.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Plus one at that point.
Yeah. Yeah. So, that's one of the things I love about John's show is he's always encouraging you, to make sure that you have it to get ready to go, kind of a thing. And we've talked about that. All 4 of us have talked about it numerous times. But it's something that you need to think about, or at least you should consider thinking about as you're purchasing these items. A lot of radios work better with an external antenna, or even a magnet mount antenna. There's a pigtail adapter you can put in there. So a lot of those things seem to be common sense to some of us, but maybe not so to somebody new just coming in. And of course, if you've got questions, the 4 of us would love to answer those regarding our suggestions and even our opinions here on Handi-talkie radios. Anybody got anything else to toss in there?
I can just throw in that I have, we'll put the link in the show notes, but on my private page, w7dbo.net, I have a breakdown of my HT Go bag that identifies all these different breakouts. And I just brought it up. One of them that I failed to mention was, you obviously replace the stock antenna that comes with it, but they've done a shootout in the past, and they found out this RH-660S. It's an extension antenna. It's one you have to be really careful with because it collapses down, but it's probably a 3-foot antenna, but that's the one that has the most gain. So that's the antenna you need when you really need to make that contact, and you got to be really careful with it because it does load so heavy on the HT.
Nice.
But we can put in the show notes. I've kind of broken down all the things you get, in a small go bag for your HT radio.
Very good. Very good. And George, I think we might have done a show about that same topic years ago. Did we? For some reason I'm thinking that, or at least we talked about it.
What was that again, Cale?
The Handi-talkie go bag. Didn't we talk about that in the past?
We did do a go bag show.
Okay.
And I think we talked about HTs as one of the parts of that. Yeah.
And it was lawn, whatever game you played there with the Frisbees.
Oh yeah, that's right. Frisbee golf.
Frisbee golf. Okay, so we'll find all those links and put them in the show notes here as we talk about Handi-talkies. Thanks, guys, for your suggestions on all of those and your input. I know that when I came into the hobby, I didn't have a whole lot to spend, and I was directed to the Oshin, and it was either that or the FT60, which at that time was really expensive compared to what it is now because there was no competition. And I went with the Oshin. I've been very happy with it, so I'm glad that I was directed that way. Let's keep talking about radios because, of course, that's what this whole topic is about. But, you kind of go from the Handi-talkie, and I don't want to say too much about the exercise here recently. I know John's wanting to talk about it on his show, but recently we had the big Grid X exercise here in town, and we had 31 hams participate. We manned 13 different stations. It was just a great success. And what happened was a lot of amateurs who showed up with just a Handi-talkie realized that that usually won't really get the job done. So now they're waking up and they're saying, hey, I need more than this Handi. Of course, we're kind of a rural suburban area, I guess you'd call it, so maybe it's different in the big cities. But the mobile radios are just so much more radio when it comes to performance. And let's talk about that for just a minute. And then along with some suggestions, we also have some off out of the catalog suggestions, I guess you'd call it, Jeremy. And let's just go back to you. They come in multiple flavors. Mainly you can get them single band and dual band. Where do you fall out with those?
This is an area where I think you start getting into a little bit more having to pay attention to your application because, when I started, my first mobile was really, geared to be used at home. And I started with the Yaesu FT 8800, which is a dual band, dual receive VHF, UHF radio. Fantastic radio, bulletproof. But I mean, that's all it was an analog radio. These days, if you're into D-Star, you buy a D-Star one. If you're into APRS, you buy a Kenwood. If you're into System Fusion, you buy a Yaesu one. Almost everybody still makes just a standard analog-only version of the radio. I guess I'll try to keep this brief, but my probably my favorite still just analog dual band is going to continue to be the Kenwood D71 because it still has an honest to God packet port on it. If you want to upgrade to an APRS capability, you can buy the TNC control head that comes in the 710 separately, and it's a Kenwood. It's got built-in crossband repeating. If you are way bought into Kenwood and using Sky Command, there's some capabilities there. So I think it is a good value of a radio. But there are two other radios, one of which I picked up at Dayton, which has actually become one of my favorite Dayton purchases. So I love the sub $100 high value purchases at Dayton. The infamous Titera MD380 HT that we probably all have was one of those purchases. But this year from Richard at MTC Radio, I picked up another Titera radio called the MD8600. You familiar with this?
Yeah, that's the little micro dual bander, right? Or is it the tri-band?
Yes. Mine, well, I think technically it is tri-band, but I've never tried it on 220. But yes, it is small. It is fit in the palm of your hand small, 25 watts on VHF, 20 watts on UHF. The version that Richard sells at MTC Radio is actually, I don't know what IPX rating it is, but I think it's IPX 68. So it is slightly water and dust proof. I know folks are using these to put on quads or in Jeeps and things like that. But what I love about this radio is, it's relatively easy to program, very easy to program through the software, relatively easy to program from the front panel and the mic. The manual for it's fairly decent, but it's just a nice 20 watt radio that's tiny, fits in an ammo can very well, very field expedient. It's rugged. I mean, and it's around $100.
Yeah,
and
close
I think
close to $100 right there at it.
Yeah. Now, the one thing I will say is, and I was trying to research this because I've never played with it. It is a multiple band radio, but I cannot tell you if it is actually a multiple receive radio. So I don't know if it could receive, like VHF and UHF at the same time, or VHF and VHF at the same time. For $100, I don't care.
Just buy two.
Yeah, if you really need it, just buy two. It has USB programming capability. It's got a speaker output, and then a fairly rugged like mini DIN. That's not the right word, but it's not like a modular plug. It's actually a little like socket thing with a twist lock. But it's just a fun radio for less than $100, and it's the radio in my house currently as a mobile that gets used the most. So that's good.
That's good to hear, because I haven't heard any good or bad reports on that. So thank you for sharing it.
Yeah, I mean, as far as there have been a number of those like small form factor 20 watt radios that have had a bunch of issues, but this one really seems to have been fairly rock solid. I mean, for what I'm using it for, which is programmed in 5 or 6 repeaters and talk on it, have not really run into any issues.
Nice.
Now, the last thing I'll say about mobiles, and this is kind of, I'm going to ignore commercial gear altogether. But again, getting into the digital side of things, I am a D-Star user. I'm a DMR user. ICOM released this year a new, it's a dual band but single receive D-Star radio called the ID 4100. The thing that I like about this radio, despite the fact that it has all of the latest and greatest ICOM D-Star technologies, in other words, GPS location and automatic programming of analog and digital repeaters. It has the new hotspot and access point modes. It has, everything that they've done. It has a Bluetooth option. But if you ever saw the original 880, it is a tiny radio tiny-ish for a 50-watt dual band radio. The display on it is a tiny little head. I mean, it's compared to most radio detachable heads, this thing is tiny. And I like it because it makes for a very clean and organized installation. Again, the real selling point of it is a D-Star radio. If you don't have D-Star nearby or you don't have hotspot capability, I would not recommend you buy it. But that is going to be one of the radios at the top of my list next year in Dayton.
Very good, very good. So, George, we heard from Jeremy. The 4100 is really a radio that caught my eye, but you lent me your 880, and I sent it back with a manual that had 288 pages in it. Totally scared me to death. I never got that thing to work on VHF analog. So, that's a really important point, though. I think that generation of the ICOM radios, that's probably their first or second generation VHF UHF radios. The user interface was really poor. Mm-hmm. And the newer generation radios, like the one that Jeremy was talking about, the 4100, has the newer DR mode and all that, easier to use user interface. Nice. So I think your experience with the 4100 would be much better than the 880. By the way, why do you think I sent you the 880? It was a test, and I failed.
It's not a test. It was just like painful for me to use it.
Yeah, that's a scale.
Yeah, I can't figure it out. Maybe he could use it. So that's a radio where once you programmed it for the things you want, you just don't touch it again. Yeah. But I find that really frustrating.
Yeah, it was.
Which is, by the way, back to the Kenwood. One of the reasons why I generally like Kenwood Handi-talkies and mobiles is because their user interface is much more obvious to use. And all of them are pretty good these days, but compared to the Chinese radios, they really are noticeably better. Yeah. For me, if I were going to go on the cheap, if you go a cut above the Chinese radios, probably the best deal going is the Yaesu monoband 2-meter radio. It's the FTM 3200 is the new version of that, and it's about $170, but it's like a 70-watt radio. So if you really don't need UHF and 2 meters is sufficient, then that's a fabulous radio for that price. Those have always been a great deal. But like for me, that's really not useful because all of our club stuff is on UHF. And in a lot of areas, there's so much going on, you need both bands. And I would go with Jeremy's suggestion for the TMV71. It's a Kenwood. It's a great radio, dual band, great performance, easy to use, and
has a packet port.
Did you say it has a packet port also?
Yeah. Yes. Sorry, I'm very frustrated that there seems to be a war on the packet port. Like none of ICOM's latest generation high-end radios have a packet port.
Yeah, I don't really understand that. That seems like such an obvious thing you'd want to put on there anyway, even if, not a lot of people use it, but I don't know why you'd bother taking it off.
Got to save that 18-cent item on the bomb.
Yeah, that DIN connector. Ooh, boy.
Yeah.
I don't know.
We
that seems
used
kind
it.
of a miss.
We used it this week in the exercise with the TMV71 with a signal link doing sound card packet. Worked like a champ.
Oh, huh. Yeah. So those would be my picks. If you're willing to spend some more money, like I think also you were saying, Jeremy, you start to get into the more digital fancy radios. My personal favorite at the moment is the ICOM ID 5100. And when it first came out, I thought it was the ugliest display I'd ever seen.
I remember that.
This day, I'm still not happy with it. I think it is kind of a miss on the display. But I think from a feature and a usability perspective, I think it's very good. It's a big display. So the functionality, the performance is great. I think that's a real winner.
Nice. Is that a touch screen like the 7100, or is it just an intuitive display kind of thing?
No, it's touchscreen, just like the 7100. That's what makes it so nice. So like with the 7100, what threw me for a loop when I first played with that radio was I thought, I can't figure out where the function button is to change the frequency or the mode. And then it dawned on me, oh, you just press that number on the screen. And like I was overthinking it. And the 5100 is the same way.
Okay.
So although there's more soft buttons on it, but yeah, so it's a really decent radio.
Nice.
Still has a sucky screen, but it's good radio.
Either way, it's good radio. John, what do you like? And before you say that, we know that you're a big fan of the 710, but tell us if that's it, why, and fill us in.
Well, for me, like I have to agree with Jeremy on the micro radios. If you're looking for something that's not going to be very expensive and intrusive into your install, I have the BTEC 2501 that's been replaced now by some different UV25X4, which is a tri-bander. But that little tiny mini radio, really, I put that in the wife's Pilot, and it actually stayed there. And it's just a nice little radio. You're not putting a lot of money into it, and it's good for install. I've also put those in the smallest of ammo cans you can get from Harbor Freight or Walmart. So that's a great little tiny radio. As far as the TM D710 GA that I have with Kenwood, it really fits what I do in the field. I do event support. So when I'm VHF, UHF in the field, I'm doing event support, or whether that's like LaJoda, which is heavily on APRS reliant, or we're sending FL Digipacket from a remote station. So all the event support I do, I don't do anything within really cell phone range except for the LaJoda. I like doing the extreme backcountry, no cell phone range, half hour away from cell phone range. So you're really you're the item in the event support. You are really needing to have good communications. So just having the availability on that D710 to run the packet, run the TNC, or go to FL Digi mode, what comes off a separate sound card. I just really like that radio. So that's one I can say that I'm happy I got, and I really don't see any other kind of radio that I'd replace it with right now.
Nice. Well, that's really good to hear, especially from you and Jeremy both, regarding those low cost entry level. I guess we call them entry level rigs now, but that's good to know, because there are a lot of people out there like I was when I first got in. Man, back then, buying a 5-watt handy for $120, you were excited, you got a deal. But now you can get a 25-watt mobile. That's quite a shout, or something to shout about if you're a new ham. So, good on the manufacturers for doing that. And a lot of people don't like it, but it is it's helping people get in the hobby, get going. So,
and I have a local ham here that's taken that Noji, N-O-J-I. He's taken that, or I say N0JI, he's taken that and turned it into Manpack. So he's put it into the backpack and uses that as just basically a 25-watt HT.
Wow, that's pretty cool. Pretty cool stuff. Well, my favorite, of course, is going to be the dual band 71A. We've talked about it, and that's a horse that we could beat to death. But if you're listening and you're considering spending $300+ on a good quality Japanese manufactured type dual band radio, you will not be disappointed with a 71A. The reason I wanted it so bad was for the crossband repeater, and I use that thing all the time. It's just awesome that you can take a 0.2 watt Handi-talkie out here way far out in the country and crossband through your van sitting in the driveway and make that contact on the local repeater. Or even if you're doing it simplex with having that extra power. So if you ever consider that you may be coming up to something like that, or you may need some extra reach or just some utility, really look into the crossband repeating radios. I don't think it's a wasted expense, actually. And the dual band dual receive, it scratches my itch. So I really appreciate that in the radio.
So I have a it's not radio related, and I don't know if we're going to cover this later, but I came across something a couple months ago that makes one heck of an accessory for these radios out in the field.
Okay.
So you guys remember there was a company called MCM Electronics based out of here in Ohio. They were part of the overall Premier Farnell family. MCM Electronics as a brand has been dissolved, and they are now part of Element 14. But I got an email from them the other day saying, hey, all of the MCM Electronics house brands, including Tenma and Stellar Labs and all these are available again in our catalog. Now, the reason this matters is Stellar Labs was a brand that they made all kinds of audio video stuff for. But one of the things that was really interesting is they make these tripod stands that are made for, they have several that are made for like loudspeakers, like if you're doing a PA system, but they have one that's made for a lighting system, and it extends to 10 feet.
Wow.
which is about 4 feet higher than you see in these average. The best part about it, of course, is that the thing is less than $50, and it says it can hold up to 100 pounds. But one of these tripods, I've seen one in person. They're only about maybe 4 feet collapsed or slightly smaller. And then they come with a bar across the top for mounting lights, which if you want to stick an antenna on, it's not necessary. Cale, I'll make sure you have the link for the show notes because the model number is the 555-11635.
Yeah, I'll never remember that, but we'll link it in the show notes.
But yeah, I think that's a pretty good deal. Yeah. $45 or less for a 10-foot tripod that is, again, having seen one in person, is fairly sturdy.
Yeah, and
is that the one with the crank? Does it crank up or lift up?
This is a lift up. Okay. But the other thing that's nice too is each of the sections, as it cranks up, has a cross cotter pin, so you're not just relying on like some kind of a twist compression fitting.
I like that.
Yeah, because those plastic pieces they fail, and when they fail, especially if I've loaded those up with lights before, when you do test that 100-pound limit, and if it doesn't come with a cotter pin, you definitely want to drill your own cotter pin in those.
Nice. Now that might be something to add to the pickup when you go out into the field to toss an antenna against.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. Those pipes are big enough to fit the military poles.
Okay.
Down in. Yeah.
Very good. Cool stuff. Okay, so I think we've talked about the mobile radios, VHF, UHF, and I think we got it covered. But man, I tell you, you heard us. The Kenwood mobiles are really a great place to start. You may be looking, and I want to touch on this real quick, Jeremy. We talked about this a few minutes ago, and one of you said you had something written down, maybe regarding this. But you mentioned, Jeremy, the 8800 from Yaesu, which is out of production now. The 8900 is kind of taking its place there, and I kind of feel like that probably won't last much longer, actually. But they also make a radio which is the 7900. It's kind of an old school single VFO, single frequency on the display, but it's a dual band radio, no crossband repeat, but it's a brick house solid radio, detachable face. Somebody may come up and say, Cale, Jeremy, George, John, I can't afford a $359 radio right now, but I could swing this $279 for a brand new 7900 with a warranty. Would you say something like that would be a good investment for a ham who's looking to improve their radios in their car or something?
Oh, I'm a fan of that radio. I've recommended it to other new hams who didn't quite want to. It's kind of like hard drives. They're like, I'll never need two bands at the same time. When we all said, I'll never need more than 20 megabytes.
Yeah.
But no, basically, to me, it was kind of like if you expanded the FT60 to a 50-watt radio, that's kind of what you had. And they're from the same generation of Yaesu technology.
Yeah. Nice interface.
One thing that is kind of handy in the ham world, when it comes to the Japanese radios in particular, the pricing on the radios generally reflects the feature set more so than the performance. In other words, if you buy the $170 Yaesu 2-meter only radio, that radio's core receive performance probably won't be that much different than a $500 radio. The big difference is really going to be the features that you get. And the pricing between the big three vendors, ICOM, Kenwood, Yaesu, they tend to have similar products and similar price points. So the point of all that is that you can pretty much take the price and look at that as kind of a metric of sophistication and features. So if you'd say, well, I can't afford a $500 radio, but I could afford a $250 radio, would that be any good? The answer is, as a radio, yes, it'll be a perfectly fine, safe choice. The only question is, does it have the sort of secondary whizzy features that you might be lacking? And for 90% of the people, the answer is probably no. So to me, the biggest breakpoint is going from a single VFO to a dual VFO radio. Now I essentially have two radios simultaneously in one. And is it worth, going from $150 to $300 to get that? For me, it is, and beyond that, you're really talking about digital features and stuff like that you may or may not need. So I think the price is a pretty good proxy for just, like the sophistication of the feature set.
Yeah, so if you come up with a budget of $300 and there's 3 of them out there, they're probably going to all be pretty much the same with their performance. And you're right, George, thinking about that. I mean, you look at the great, I think it's a FT400 or 450, the pretty multicolor display from Yaesu that does APRS and all. And it's a great radio, but it's almost, $600 brand new. And a lot of people scratching their head, wow, do I really need that? I mean,
so
maybe not.
The funny thing about that, Cale, is I kind of think of myself as sort of a gearhead, and I look at these radio features and I think, wow, that's a really cool feature. And there's a big long list of features on the more expensive radios, and I never use any of those features. I mean, and I think I would be the target market for all that stuff. And basically, I need to set the frequency, offset the tone, and transmit, that's kind of what I do 99% of the time. The only feature that I ever use in my FM radios that is beyond that would be a digital mode. So I use my D-Star radio because I like D-Star. But, all the other stuff, except for dual VFO, you really don't need most of that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. And John could tell you, before you get out in the field, you need to know what your purpose is, the reason you're going out. So you can take that back and going through your mindset on this purchasing thing, because you can really overthink your purchases.
Yes.
And I'm one of those. I really am. And that's why we enjoy doing these shows in this really candid conversation to try to help you understand and make a good choice with your money, because everybody knows how hard it is to get that nowadays, right? So if you overthink it, you're gonna probably spend more than you really need. But if you can determine what you want to use it for, like, okay, Cale, down here in the country, the repeater's a long way away. I want to be able to sit in my house and use a mobile radio because I spend most of my time on the radio while I'm driving, VHF, UHF, repeater talk stuff, but I still want to be able to talk on the repeaters from inside my house. Well, I can't without having to buy a radio, put up an antenna on the outside of the house, another power supply you got to buy. But if I can swing one of those crossband repeating rigs, put it in the van, set it up, and use it, well, I've just killed 2 birds, 1 rock, and I'm really happy. So I knew going into this, and it took me almost 3.5 years to save up to buy that radio, the TMV 71A, but I've got another one now because it's so freaking awesome. and it's used. The first one I bought was an open box B-stock kind of thing from MTC. The second one I bought used. Got a really good deal thanks to a very generous ham. But that was my goal. My goal was to crossband repeat, to get into the local repeaters. Now I found all kind of crazy other uses for it. So, if you live in an area where nobody talks on UHF, you may be able to get away with the 3200 from Yaesu. George has told you it's a great radio, and be happy there. Or you may want APRS, so you got to go up. It just determine what your goal is and go there.
Exactly. And I think the big kind of epiphany is that's like that 3200 radio. Its raw performance on a 2-meter repeater is not going to be any better than a $600 radio.
Nope.
So if you're going to park it on that repeater 30 miles away, and that's pretty much where you hang out, you don't really need to spend the money. The nice thing too is if you had a radio like that, let's say you're really agonizing over this decision because, oh my God, you don't want to make a bad decision. If you bought that less expensive radio and after a year you go, well, turns out there is a UHF repeater. I really wish I had dual VFO or whatever. Get the fancier radio and you'll either sell or keep the cheaper radio. There's nothing wrong with that. It's probably not the last radio you're ever going to buy. So
put it in a go box.
Put it in the go. Exactly.
One is none. So while we're still talking mobiles, let's talk mobile HF operations. Now, this is somewhere where I'm going to come out the front and get myself out of the way real quick. I don't do mobile HF radio because I have 5 kids that I'm mobile with, so that it doesn't happen. But I know that you guys have some experiences with it. I mean, John grew up as his dad and granddad were hams, so I mean he's been around this stuff for forever. John, what are your takes on mobile HF operating?
Well, I have to switch gears because, interestingly enough, with VHF, UHF, handhelds, and mobiles, I'm a Kenwood guy. Then when you get into HF, I'm an ICOM fan. So I don't know kind of how that happened, but I have 2 ICOM rigs, or actually 3, but the one stays at home. So I do have the 7300, and that only comes outdoors when it's a field day, and it sits inside my camper, just because I want to keep that nice. So the 2 that I take routinely in the field is the ICOM 7200, which is the one that was discontinued, and then I tried selling, and right when I tried selling it, ICOM decided to re-release it, so it became impossible to sell. That is the rig that they selected for the ARL went to Puerto Rico with. They had 20 of those. So that 7200, yes, it's heavy. Yes, it's a tank, and you know you're not going to do a soda with it. But if you're not worrying about weight, that 7200 is, and it's back in production now, and there's plenty of used ones out there. The price point is really low for a ruggedized radio that has a USB into it, so you can do digital modes, and it works great. And the best of all, it looks tactical. So if you can get it in camo, which I'm not sure why, but
so yeah, Gigaparts, they used to do that. That is, they did these awesome color schemes and camo patterns, and they don't do that anymore. I'm surprised they don't, because they'd sell a bunch of that stuff.
Well, our buddy Jeremy and I have a buddy named Greg, and Greg actually took his apart and painted it green before.
Yep, OD green.
Yeah, go Big Daddy.
Yeah,
so, shout out to our man Greg.
The 7200. That is, like I said, if you're not looking for lightweight operations, that's the radio to go to. Then the second one I have is, they're still out there, and these are tanks also, but the ICOM 706 Mark IIG. That's an all mode radio. It is a power hog, but for such a small, compact all mode radio, I keep that in my truck. But then I also put that on the ATV, and that's just a great one that's out of production. But so that's kind of where I've landed. I still have on my Santa list is the Elecraft KX3. So if I'm good this year and use the next 5 years of Christmases, I might be able to get one. As my wife is sitting here in the room with me.
Yeah, I just read a news article how there's the large amount of Americans are still paying for last year's Christmas this year. So I don't know, John. You're kind of brave tonight, man. Even admitting that you have that many radios in front of your bride. So yeah, I almost bought a 706 years ago. I wish I hadn't missed the deal, but it just didn't happen. And that's just how it goes. George, we know that you and Noah were sending CW back after the flood, and so you've seen a lot in regards to mobile. I hadn't had an opportunity to give you a hard time about that in a long time. So, and love having you guys here, by the way. George, mobile HF radio for you, what does that look like?
Oh, I'd break this into 2 different topics. One is really mobile. In other words, sitting in the car or the truck or whatever with a radio talking as you go down the highway. Different from portable.
Yes.
Okay. So in the real mobile sense for HF, I've used a 706 mobile HF a bit, and it was okay. And then I got a Kenwood TS480. SAT, and that was really a really good radio. I would recommend that. So between those 2, but even any other one off the top of my head, I think of all of the real mobile form factor radios, the TS480 is great. It's probably got one of the best receivers in it. It's about a 10-year-old design, maybe more at this point. 100 watts, antenna tuner, basic antenna tuner built in. They also make a 200-watt model, which is the HX version with no tuner. So if you really want to fry yourself in the car, you can get a 200-watt PA. But the receiver in that radio is excellent, and the user interface, the control head, is nice because there's a speaker in the back. The mic plugs into it, so physically it's handy, convenient. The buttons are physical buttons, and I think one of the things you want to think about while you're screaming down the freeway is ergonomically, can you interact with the radio without taking your eyes off the road? And the 480 will let you do that because there's a bunch of buttons on the control head, as opposed to a newer radio like the ICOM 7100 that's mostly touchscreen. So if you're going to operate while driving, I would look at the 480.
Okay.
I'll plus that.
Yeah,
I mean, that's really what it comes down to is it's not just that there are physical buttons. There's a plethora of physical buttons, because even like something like the venerable, like one of the most popular portable radios ever, the Yaesu FT857, it had 3 buttons for 472 functions.
That's
and,
right.
You had to, depending on how long you held a button down, whether it was 3 seconds or 3.2 seconds, it would do something different. Whereas the Kenwood in the car, having all those buttons, like you can develop muscle memory to remember where to press to do things. So yeah, +1.
Yeah, agreed. And by the way, it's got a very good receiver in it. I mean, it's not just, it works, but it really has a good receiver. There's a great document on the Kenwood website that I downloaded some years ago that was essentially like a big app note, a technical article that Kenwood wrote about the design of the 480. In other words, these guys were so proud of their new receiver design that they wrote a whole technical article about it, and it was really quite interesting. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, so it's worth checking out. So it really is.
You would give a thumbs up for the mobile HF operations to the 480 over the 7100, because those are kind of like apples and apples almost.
Yeah, I would, and the reason I would do that is that the user interface is just better for a mobile without
operating.
looking at the display. Yeah.
Okay.
Now the 7100 is a great radio. It's a newer radio. It probably has some more features. It certainly has more modes. It's got D-Star. It's got VHF and UHF. The TS480 is HF and 6.
Okay.
So there's no 2 meters on it. It's really an HF radio, and you do tend to see at a given price point, let's say at $1,000 plus or minus price point, if the receiver is only HF versus HF and VHF, when you add the VHF stuff, you tend to compromise on something, and I don't know why that's the case, but it tends to be the case. So you may get more features, but you might be giving up some performance for a given generation of radio.
Okay.
By the way, I'm a big fan of the 7100, but I see the 7100 more as a portable radio, not backpacky. Of course, it's more like take it to field day, take it to the park. So it's got a nice control head. People either love it or hate it, and I like it actually because it's fairly compact and it's at a 45-degree angle. So it presents itself very nicely. And as you said, Cale, the user interface is pretty cool because you just touch the thing on the screen you want to change, and the screen adapts to that. So if you touch the filter shape on the display, it'll pop up a little dialog box on the display to let you change the filter characteristics.
Nice.
So the UI is very intuitive, and I think that's a big step forward.
Cool. Now,
and by the way, those radios are on like super special.
They are right now.
I think MTC's got a special. I'm pretty sure HRO has a similar special, and they're around. I want to say they're about $800.
Yeah, they're like $200 off right now. So if you're Black Friday listening and you want a HF, that may be where you want to go.
So I'm looking at the HRO website on sale. Okay, so they have the. So, what they're saying is it's $1,000 normally, on sale for $959, and then there's a little asterisk after rebate, $759.95.
It's a good deal.
So now put this in perspective. This radio does D-Star. Let's say we go back to our FM mobile discussion and say, well, I want a D-Star mobile radio. Okay, well that's the top end from ICOM, the ID 5100, which is my favorite. That's about a 500 and something radio, 550, maybe $500 at the low end. $500. Okay, for another $250, you get a whole HF radio.
Yeah, I mean that's true, but okay. Having owned the 480, having currently owned the 7100. By the way, MTC Radio has the 7100 for $939 plus the $200 off, so beating them by $20. The 7100 is interesting because as far as density, if you want an all-in-one radio that has all that stuff in your vehicle, fantastic. If you are going to be operating while going down the road, and you're actually operating while you're operating your vehicle, it is probably best to just park it on a frequency or set up the memories, that are in there. You're not going to be contest hopping as easily while you're driving. There are several things about the 7100 over the 480. Number one, the filtering, the ability to do voice recording if you wanted to do that to call CQ. But the filtering is IF-DSP versus audio frequency DSP. So it is a higher quality filtering technology, because I think actually you have to buy crystal filters, or mechanical filters rather, for the 480 if I remember correctly.
I believe that's right.
The other thing though that is a little bit frustrating about ICOM, I'm an ICOM fanboy.
Here we go.
Lay it on us.
Hold on, John.
Drum roll, please.
Well, you mentioned earlier, George, about the different generations of D-Star technology. So if memory serves, the 7100 had the ability to use a GPS to find D-Star stuff. But they didn't add any feature beyond that. Like, nothing has been backported to the radio. So the 5100 overall does have an easier VHF, UHF, D-Star experience than the 7100. On the other hand, it looks like you can get the 7100 for $739. I paid, I think, $1,600 or $1,700 the month they came out. So that folks. Radio has dropped $1,000 in about 4 years.
Yeah, that's a pretty wicked drop. That's not that, hasn't been historically that common that they would drop that much. But I think that sort of happens in other radios too. Like when the FT991 came out, that thing came out at about $1,700, and I think it's now down to 13 something. Now that's not as much of a drop, but they also went from the 991 to the A model, which kind of left people high and dry. So yeah, so things do change.
And we won't bring up the fact that Jeremy still regrets selling the 480 to our buddy Ed.
I didn't want to talk about that.
Echo Delta Fox. Well,
did I was there a raw nerve here?
Yeah, as George was saying,
you don't remember this?
Jeremy's steam's coming out of his headphones right now. I can just
it's not steam. It's sadness. I was crying. I was rocking in my chair and crying. Yeah, no, when Ed W4EDF was getting into radio, at the time I had the disposable income and ADD when it came to radios, that I was like buying a radio, keeping it for a while, selling it at a loss, going and buying another one. And Ed was entering the market for HF, and I had this radio. I actually had it mounted in my car with a Tar Heel screwdriver. Antenna on the Jeep Junior, and I was like, well, you know what, I want to go play with something else, and I don't even remember what it was I went to go play with, and I was like, Ed, I'll make you a fantastic deal on this radio, and Ed kindly bought it, and of all the HF radios I've gotten rid of, that is the one that I regret the most.
Mm-hmm. And Ed still loves it, by the way. Every time I talk to Ed, he's like, hey, man, do you remember I bought Jeremy's 480? It's the best radio ever. When you talk to him, let him know I still love it.
Yeah.
Hey, Ed, hope you're doing good, man. It's been a while. So, okay, so here's where Kel's at with this. Again, I don't do mobile HF, and Jeremy, I'm going to come back to you in just a second. But I am flipping a coin right now. I've got my TS-850 for sale. It's the big, old-school, monster HF rig that sits on the desk, and I'd like to sell it. And I'd like to sell it to purchase either the 7100 or the 480, and we don't have to have that discussion tonight, but the two, it's so funny that the two radios that you're talking about are the two that are in very serious contention if I can actually sell the other one. So without selling it, it doesn't matter. It's a moot point. But Jeremy, did you want to add anything else to the discussion of the two radios that I'm actually considering pretty heavily?
Man, it's hard. At the time that I had the 480, I also had a 710, a Kenwood 710 mounted in my vehicle. Having the one head is very nice. It's very clean. It's a very good looking control head in the 7100, having just the one radio for all the capability. Plus you get a digital mode. I would definitely say overall, not even counting the fact that after the mail-in rebate, it's like $60 cheaper than the 480. But the 7100 is far and away just a lot more radio, a ton more radio.
Yeah.
And so honestly, if I were making this decision today and I were in your shoes, I am probably leaning towards the 7100.
So I got a question for you, Cale. Would you be using this mostly at home, or would you be using it mostly like in the vehicle while driving?
No mobile HF for Cale.
7100.
Okay. Yeah, no mobile HF. That's not that's 15 years off for me.
You know, honestly, it's not easy.
No, it's not.
There's a lot of work. I mean, we did an episode with was it K0BG about talking all the work that you have to do to prepare your vehicle, and the antennas get really expensive very quickly. You know, it's basically you're starting at about $400 for the Tar Heel, the little Tar Heel 2, and that's really you really need a bigger antenna.
Yeah. And it's just not feasible with 5 kids in the car. I mean, no way.
Well,
you know,
and with the van you have, I mean, your van would have a 28-foot
exactly
clearance.
Exactly. So there's no mobile HF for me, but I do. You know, it's going to replace the 850 on the bench, and the reason that it is these two, and John, the reason it's not the 72, which all of my boys love, the reason it's not is because I like it not taking a lot of space up on the deck. You know, just a small control head, whether it's the 480 or the 7100. I just like that. But it also gives me the potential to slide it down into an MTM container and take it out, set it up for field day, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, or the potential of using it with our local areas group. So that's kind of why my head is kind of going that direction. So,
Cale, let me throw out just a couple quick things. I think that in terms of functionality, the 7100 would be a better way to go. And I'll echo something Jeremy said, and that is you do get D-Star with it. So you could just have at some point, maybe a D-Star hotspot or something like that. And the nice thing about a digital mode like D-Star is you're not relying on propagation being good. You know, you're working in the shack on something and you want to just listen to something in the background. You can find activity always on the digital modes. The second thing is that for packaging up that radio, take a look at my personal website, www.kj6vu.com. I wrote an article about how I packaged up a 7100 in one of those rigid tool cases.
Yeah, I remember that one.
And it's really slick. We use it on field day. In fact, we ran our VHF 2-meter and 432 sideband station was a 7100. Worked great. I only have one complaint about that radio, and that is that the control head is small and lightweight. And if you plug a microphone into it, like what's cool about the control head is you only need to run the control cable to the radio, nothing else. The control head has a speaker built in and a speaker jack. The control head has the mic jack, and the control head has the paddle jack for your CW paddle. So actually everything plugs into the control head. Well, if you plug your mic into the control head, which you would, and you move the mic around a lot, you can whip the control head around the desk because it's not heavy at all.
Right.
So if I were going to use it as a more of a base station, I would figure out a way to mount it to something, like a piece of plywood or something. Yeah, so it doesn't walk around the desk.
Good idea.
Yeah, and just remember, I feel like I know because I have this mounted in a gator case, like actually mounted with screws, and I feel like this might have had like a traditional what is it, quarter 24 like tripod thread in the bottom of it, if I'm not mistaken.
You're exactly right, because I've seen people use like a Lido mount with that.
Okay. Well, that would be a way to solve the problem then. Yeah. Just screw it into something.
But one other thing that you did make me think of, at least with the 480, you get a 1-to-3 antenna matching unit. You're going to need to add something external to this. I mean, I have an LDG AT100 Pro 2. There's one that's I forget, it's like the LDG I100. It's specifically for ICOM radios. So that's something to keep in mind, that you will want to add a second tuner or add an external tuner to it probably.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, just for bang for the buck, especially at 739, like it's ridiculous.
Okay, so since this is my show, this is going to be my commercial. If you want a really nice nice 1990s vintage. It's a cherry. I'm not making it up. It's a beautiful rig. TS850. Buy it so I can buy another radio. Call me. We'll work something out. I've already got the shipping figured across the U.S., so anyway. Hey, anything else to add before we're going to take a break right here and come back in just a moment? Or are we good here on this mobile HF discussion? Okay.
I think we're good.
All right, guys, stick around. We'll be right back in just a moment. You're listening to episode whatever it is, but it's the super special number 4 shopping show, special edition program here, the Ham Radio 360 podcast. Back in a moment. Merry Christmas. So it's time for the second annual Help a Ham charity giveaway that Main Trading Company does. It's a really cool thing. It's kind of 2 parts, and I want to try to explain it to you just in case you don't really understand what's going on down there. Richard and Christine Lenore own Main Trading Company in Paris, Texas. They have a giveaway every year that you can participate in a couple of different ways. What they're looking for is someone who is an amateur radio operator who's down on their luck, having a hard time. That might be you listening, by the way. Needs some gear. Maybe you got caught up in a lightning storm, or maybe one of the fires out west, or even the hurricanes that came up the Gulf Coast, and you lost your gear. You have a need that needs to be met. Well, they're taking nominations for amateur radio operators right now who fit that bill. If that's you, that's great. If you know someone that's in that shape, you can nominate them right now at mtcradio.com, and they'll be put into the drawing, right? They'll take all the nominations they receive, they'll go through them, and they'll pick 1 or 2 that they can best serve. Now, as well as nominating folks, you can also donate as little as $1. Now, I've done more than that, and I want to encourage you to do the same. This doesn't get you anything for free. You're helping someone else, right? The spirit of giving, I guess is what we'll say here. And you can do that at maintradingcompany.com, mtcradio.com. If you go to the show notes at hamradio360.com, scroll all the way to the bottom of the show notes for this show. There's a link there. Or just go to mtcradio.com. You'll see Santa Claus there. Click on him. Give some bucks, guys. You can skip a cup of coffee on Monday morning to help another ham. MTC Radio will be putting in some funds as well as working with manufacturers to try to get some price breaks on things to really make this happen. But they need your help. They need my help, and I'll probably give some more. It's a great cause. It costs a few bucks on your end, could make someone really happy on the other end, and it's a great way to build this amateur radio community. That's all I'm going to say about it now, but you can find it at mtcradio.com. Find Help a Ham there. Be a part of making someone else's holiday season a little brighter. So let's keep this thing rolling. And speaking of rolling, we're not getting into the shack yet. Although we've talked about things that you can use in the shack as a base station, and things that you could use in your vehicle mobile, and then pedestrian mobile, of course, with a Handi-talkie. Actually, my first base station was a Handi-talkie. We're not going back down that road, but we are going outside, and we're going to talk about portable gear. We're going to talk about field day gear, field radio gear, and we've got some guys right here who are just full of knowledge. George, you get out. You're skinny. You go climb mountains and talk on radios, and y'all have big field day at Bayonet and all this stuff. So let's talk about some field operable gear, whether it's field day field radio gear or you're taking it on soda type things. Let's kind of just mash those together and just get some hints and what you like for those types of scenarios. They're going to be different, of course, but because there's a lot of different variables there. But let us know what you're thinking on that.
You know, that is such a hot topic now. There's so many people who are getting into operating portable, not just for soda stuff, but just, go to the park portable because the radios are so small and the batteries are getting lighter. It's just such an exciting area, and there are so many good ones to pick from. And for me, I'd say at the extreme soda end of things, in other words, the smallest, lightest portable thing you can get away with, it's pretty hands down the K2. Not the K2, the KX2. Thank you. Elecraft radio that's been out for a year and a half because it's the smallest radio that has the best performance and the feature set that you want. So that's absolutely my favorite. I like it better than my KX3, which is actually a better radio a little bit. But the KX2 is just so small, and you're really not sacrificing any performance. So that's a top pick. The 817 is still super popular. That thing has a longer life than it deserves because it's been in the market for 15 years. Jeremy, you probably know.
It's probably longer than that because it's actually had two lives. There was the 817, then the 817 ND.
That's right. So even the ND version, I think that thing is 12, 15 years old at this point. But that's popular.
And it's half the price as the Elecraft. So somebody wanting to get into soda, that's a good choice?
Well, it's not quite half the price. So the 817 is still about $650. And the KX2, the base model is about $800.
And now, that's $650 with no filters,
right?
And no high precision oscillator,
and no antenna tuner. So if you're really comparing apples to apples, it's really $650 versus $800. Now, the one thing that the KX2 doesn't have, it doesn't have 2 meters and 440. And 432 sideband. So if you really want VHF in the same radio, then it's kind of no contest. You kind of have to go with the 817. But the when you go to add the accessories like an antenna tuner, it would be built into the KX2, whereas with the FT817, it's external. The batteries in the KX2 last much longer than the batteries in the FT817. Because the KX2 consumes less current, less power than the 817, and partly because the batteries in the 817 are typically going to be AA's or nickel metal hydrides or some similar rechargeable battery that's not quite the energy density of the lithium ion that's in the KX2. So for a whole bunch of reasons, my pick would really be the KX2. Now, one guy who has an interesting point of view is the fellow that does the Tech Nord video series.
Julian, OH8STN.
Yeah, so Julian's top pick is the 817, and he made a very good point in one of his videos. He said that of all the radios, it's one of the most rugged, and I would agree because it's a pretty stout little box with a nice extruded aluminum kind of front panel. It probably is mechanically more durable, so I'd give it points for that.
And they've been around for so long, and there's a load of them on the used market. If you can that direction, you can really save a lot of money. Get on the side of a mountain and make some contacts.
That's a good point. And those radios, they'll really last. So I think for real portable stuff, that's what I would look at for field day. Drive the radio to the park kind of field day. Boy, it's like almost anything is viable. That probably my two favorites would be the 7300, and I kind of have. I'm kind of going back and forth on the FT991. So when the 991 first came out before the 7300, I thought, well, that's great. It's got everything, just like the older Yaesu 897s, 857, etc. And then I realized that the Spectrum Scope, which is a great new feature, only works when you press the button. And since then, with the A model, they've fixed that. So that feature, that kind of poorly implemented feature, kind of put that radio on my not favorite radio list.
I gotcha.
So I didn't really care for it that way, but I've upgraded mine to the 991 by having Yaesu install the upgraded pan adapter and whatever else they change, and it was $300 to do it, which was not that bad. Originally, I heard it was going to be about $500, but the price came down. So I think that's not too unreasonable. So there's a case where the manufacturer actually did provide a path to upgrade. So I effectively have a 991. And so now that I've got so now that it's upgraded and the Spectrum Scope works real time simultaneously with receiving, and it's a slightly more compact radio than the 7300, plus it has VHF and UHF. And I'm kind of going from I can't stand this thing to I could see where that would be a decent field day radio. So I think at the end of the day, the 7300 is a nicer looking radio, better display. Mm-hmm. But the 991 is a pretty good second best contender for a field day radio, I would say.
Very good, very good. Don't write it off, I guess.
No, don't write it off. And I've really gone back and forth in this thing, and now I'm kind of getting back into it. So
I remember when you got it, and you really didn't like it. I remember that.
No,
you didn't like it.
I really didn't, and I was just really irritated by the stupid spectral scope only running when the audio was off. That just soured me. But I'm kind of getting back into it.
Yeah. So, John, you do a podcast about field radio. We've talked about Julian. We know he gets out there in the snow and does crazy stuff. But what are you talking about, John, to your audience when it comes to field radio HF gear, whether it's packing it in or driving it out, like George says? Where do you fall out?
Well, my idea of going light is I only take the ATV and the F-250 truck up, and I leave the 16-foot and the 32-foot trailer home. So I noticed how you went to the George, the skinny guy, for the soda stuff, and not Jeremy and I. I don't know, Jeremy, if you picked up on that or not.
Sorry, guys.
I definitely felt
that. Must
that.
be one of them Freudian things. Sorry about that. It was George's turn to go first.
No problem.
A bunch of kids.
Well, like I said, kind of like I said earlier, it's a 7300 on field day, and the 7200. And you kind of talked about 7200 not really fitting in a box. I used to have the 7200, the ICOM 7200. I used to have it in a rack, and it was nice. But that thing stands alone. I like it just on the table by itself. It doesn't. I can't really. I've tried to fit it into boxes, and I don't think it needs to be.
Yeah.
It's like I said, 7300, and I think Jeremy and Georgia pointed out the 7300 on field day is, you do get that overload, and I saw that at field day, just with an 857 in the campground transmitting on a different band. I saw the overload on the display. So yeah, probably you got to do some things to the 7300 if you're going to be in a multi-operator field day. But like I said, then the like I said, KX3, KX2. I got an interview coming up with Stuart. Talked about how he, in fact, he just released that YouTube video of how he went maritime mobile with an Alex loop and in his Elecraft.
Did you recognize the music there was the "What Do You Do with a Scurvy Pirate" when the video?
That was very good.
I didn't realize it, but after I watched the video, I walked away whistling that, and I thought to myself, "Where did that come from?" And I went back and started the video, and it's a sound bed there. It's KB1HQS, great guy, and shout out to Stuart, man. He's still having fun. Actually, I got a spot for him earlier today, and I'll talk about my phone later, but I couldn't spot him on the internet. So anyway, so you're saying 7300. I know Jeremy's going to say 7300. We're going to let him say it here in just a second. But you're also saying the Elecraft rigs as well as the 7200 on the park bench, on the picnic table there in the campground. You're happy with that?
Yeah, and coming, like I said, I don't do that much. I want to get into the more soda type stuff. But just interviewing Stuart recently, he's saying, even if he has an antenna fail, he has he can just banana connect into that. He said it's what he does and what he goes to when he gets up on the hills.
He's real skinny too.
Of course, the king of it. He is.
Of course, he's
the king
tall.
of Napoda. So.
Yeah, he won it all, baby. KB1HQS, what's up, bro? So, okay, Jeremy, we know that you've had, one or two field days now with the 7300, and we know that you've had the 480 you've mentioned. I'm sure you used that. You've had a 450, I remember, in a box at a time. So, tell us what you're talking about.
Well, let me plus one the Elecraft KX2 for pocket portable. I think for a portable QRP rig, there literally is, for HF, there is just not a better option between the tuner, the onboard high capacity lithium battery, all of that. KX2 hands down. Now, I for field day or what, like if the type of stuff that John does, it might be extended field portable ops. Yes, I think the 7300 is a fantastic radio, but it is actually not going to be my first choice. And there's a couple reasons. The 7300 is a landmark radio in our hobby, period. It is something that if somebody has, well, actually, gosh, what are they down to now?
Oh, they're at
less than 13,
something like that?
Yeah, less than 13 on sale.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Kidding.
So 12, MTC list, it says after mail-in rebate, $12.48. Fantastic radio, worth saving your pennies for, et cetera. It's everything that everybody says it is. However, one of the things that I was disappointed when I got mine was I was like, wow, these knobs feel a little more rickety than I'm used to on some of ICOM's other gear. The front end of the radio is really designed to be operated alone, as John referenced. And this is something that both he and I have experienced getting, other stations at field day into the radio. I mean, it has built-in protection and whatnot, but again, it's really not designed to be operated in without some front end filtering in an area where it's going to be doing other radios. So, for field days that I've done, the radios that I have run is a Yaesu FT897, which is no longer manufactured. That radio was spiritually replaced by the 991 that George mentioned. It was cool because it was a box. You could buy battery packs that went into it. It had a tuner that bolted on the side of it, and it was a neat all-in-one package that also gave you VHF and UHF. It's cool, but I also remember in a previous episode I said, let's stop talking about the 857 and 897, which are two of the most ubiquitous, like, portable HF radios ever. There's so much better technology now. So I have run a Yaesu 450, which was interesting. The radio itself is actually pretty good. Two issues that I had with it is getting levels in ALC to work properly to do PSK 31. It was like having to balance, a Mack truck on the edge of a knife, and it was something I never really had a lot of success with. The filtering on that radio is artificially crippled, so it's not continuously variable bandwidth settings and whatnot. Like, there are pre-made notches, and as it turns out, most of the time what I really wanted was always in between two settings. Still a decent radio with a lot of good features. Done the 7300, which I've covered that. Honestly, I'm going to kind of agree with John. I think for a field portable package, the 7200, the ICOM 7200, is a fantastic way to go. The only thing you're really missing from it is just so folks know, it does not do FM. And it also does not have a built-in auto tuner. So not necessarily a big deal. I don't really, the 6-meter FM, for instance, when we would do the bull run in out in Manassas Park in Virginia, we usually used 6 meters FM for the communications. So you wouldn't be able to use it in a situation like that. But for all other like sideband, CW, digital modes, and AM, the radio has you covered. Now, the other thing I will point out is I own and am a big fan of the Elecraft KX3. This radio is interesting because it's not just a radio, it's a system. And by that, I mean you start off with the base radio, which is 160 through 6 meters. There is a low-power 2-meter module option available for it. It has an antenna tuner option. It has some beefed-up front-end filtering available as an option. It has internal AA batteries. It can run up to 15 watts on certain HF bands by itself. In the system, in addition to that, they make a what is called the KXPA 100, which is a 100-watt amplifier that interfaces directly with the radio. And I have used that combination at field day to great success. There is also a pan adapter available called the PX3, which last year for field day we did all QRP. So I just used the KX3 and the PX3. Of course, the pan adapter just makes your HF operating experience so much more enjoyable. And this is part of the reason we all love the 7300. So, my two picks are probably going to be the 7200 and the KX3 and the various components. I really would love to pick up a 7200, but I just not in a position where I have like radios set aside for specific use cases like that. But those would be my picks.
Yeah.
I'm going to throw one more comment on your comment, Jeremy, and that is in thinking about field day. One more level of detail. If your field day is, two guys at the park, one on 2 meters and one on 40 meters, then the receiver performance can be like almost any radio that's decent. If you're at a field day where you've got a dozen stations and there's just a lot of RF on all the bands, then the performance of the receiver starts to become a really important thing, which is really where the Elecraft radios, I think, shine. So that's another consideration. Why do they take K3s on D-Expeditions? It's not just because they're a good radio, but it's because they keep everybody else's transmitter out of their front end better than most. So that's a thought if you're doing kind of a really serious field day with a lot of transmitters.
Not at all related to anything that you just said, but it did spark another thought.
Go ahead.
So, one of the things earlier I mentioned a discontinued radio that I'd recommend, the IC92AD handheld. Another portable radio that I think is still a very good option. The only thing that it really doesn't have is it doesn't have the modern IF DSP. It's still an audio frequency DSP radio. But I think John mentioned this earlier, but the ICOM 706 Mark II-G. Still has a really good receiver in it for all the radios in that class, VHF and UHF, and a very densely built, relatively rugged portable radio that could also, operate as a mobile very well. So yeah, I'll throw that one out there too as another one. If you're not looking to spend the big bucks or buy a new radio, that's a good one to find on the used market. Although, truthfully, they are still so popular they can be difficult to find.
Yeah, but we get back to the point that you can really save some money on those things if you can find them. I know that our local club had an auction I was unable to attend. Unfortunately, this is the most unfortunate part of it. There was one that was virtually brand new in a box that sold for $350.
Oh,
and
wow.
yeah, talk
That's
about making a man sick. And this was 3 or 4 years ago, so this was a really good deal for $350. So, yeah, there's a lot of gear out there that can be had. You just have to kind of be smart and know what you're looking for. Again, knowing what you're wanting to do with it. And one radio I haven't heard anybody mention, it's a very interesting radio to me, and it's the 891 from Yaesu. It's a full power HF plus 6, very pretty display. But I don't hear, and they're $550, 100-watt rig. It's not made to be put in a backpack and take up the side of the mountain, but it could be mobile. It could be a park bench type thing with a Bio-Eno battery. But I hear nobody talking about these things. $550. It's virtually a brand new release, maybe 2 years old now, and nobody's talking about it at all. So do you guys hear anything on that?
That's like the 857 replacement, I think.
Kind of, yes. It's no VHF, no UHF.
Okay. Right.
What I would say is I think that it is probably a fine radio for the money. It is relatively small. You say it's not made to be thrown in a backpack, but it very easily could be. The display is one of the most beautiful, white backlit black display. Like ICOM could really, use sniping whoever their front end engineer is for that, to learn how to do that. But I mean, it probably is a decent example. I know a lot of people who started with what's the low end ICOM? Is it the 710?
718.
718. There's probably a good chance that I would say that this Yaesu 891 is a better first option than the 718, just because, again, more modern technology.
Exactly. Yeah, I think one of the things that may be hampering it, and I've read some on the forums, is that it is a Yaesu. It's very menu driven, so that may be the problem. Is
three buttons,
they sold
500 possibilities.
They sold a boatload of 857s, and I don't think this is any easier, or I'm guessing just by looking at the layout of the front panel and the buttons, it's probably similar. So I can't imagine the user interface is a big detractor to it. I'm kind of surprised I don't hear more about this radio, frankly. So I don't know. Maybe
$550.
Yeah, maybe there's something else that we don't know in terms of its performance. I don't know.
John, do you hear anything in Utah on the 891? Sorry.
I haven't. Yaesu, like I said, is mostly Kenwood ICOM, what I hear out here.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I've been kind of, and once again, I think maybe everybody just ran out of money after buying all the 7300s.
They bought KX2s and then they bought the 7300 and it was over.
Yeah.
So okay, we've got a really huge audience here that are still hopefully listening to us as we ramble on about buying radios. Guys, if you're out there and you've got the 891, we would really sincerely be interested in hearing about it, because you've heard here, you've got 4 guys that have connections and talk to people all the time that don't know anything about this radio. So you're out there, you've got one, like it, love it, hate it, want it, whatever, let us know. You can find us all online. You know how to do that. But we would like to know, because we could maybe suggest it or steer someone away from it if it's not what they're looking for. So I want to talk, we mentioned it for just a minute, Jeremy, you kind of touched on the budget-friendly thing. But before we get there, I want to ask you guys just one at a time, and we'll start with John this time. What is something that you found this year that is not what you anticipated finding, but you found something for radio, and it really kind of lit your fire? You didn't realize that it was there. You got it. You heard about it, found it, and now you're crazy about it.
So what I found is, and I never thought I would really kind of need one of these, but it's from West Mountain Radio, and it's their, I'm trying to remember the name of it. It's their power. It's not their power monitor, but it's their power tester.
The power check?
Is it the power check?
It is the power check.
Yeah. So this is not, it's not like you put it in line to use it. It's not the one that no, it's the battery analyzer.
Oh, this like the CBA.
Yeah, there we go. So the CBA battery analyzer. So this is something that's you're not going to put it in line and use it while you're operating. This is to test your batteries. So what you do is you hook up a battery to this, and then you hook this to the computer, and you tell it what kind of load you want to give it, and it will essentially drain that battery at the amperage you tell it, until you tell it the voltage cutoff point, and it'll measure the performance of that battery. And it'll do it for lithium iron phosphates and the traditional SLAs or AGMs. But one thing I found interesting, and this is why I was really interested about it, was it'll also map the performance of solar panels. And so that's kind of a big thing for us in the hobby now is solar panels. And how do you know the performance of a solar panel without just going by the specs and what's basically coming out of China with different names on it? So this will do that too. You can load up a solar panel, and it'll map what you have and what your power output is, and then you can do things like, I had a AGM battery that was well past life, so I went ahead and put it on the bring it back to life mode, and it restored it, and I saw how much it was able to restore that battery, and then I did it again, and because it was an old battery, I thought, let's keep doing it until I finally saw diminished returns. But so when you look at all the batteries you have, whether they're in your Go kits or whatever you have you're using, you really don't know beyond just kind of anecdotal experience of that battery. Is that battery due to be replaced, or how is it performing, or A/B comparison? And so the computer battery analyzer has really been a fun tool for me, and I plan on putting out some YouTube videos on this to kind of show what you can do with it.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool stuff. George, have you run over anything in the Bay Area this year that you just, since you lost your HRO?
Yes.
Have you found anything to kind of replace it with? I mean, have you stumbled over anything like that? I didn't even know about that, but what have you found this year? Because you're always into stuff.
Gosh, two things I think kind of pleasantly surprised me. One thing I want to give John credit for, and that is he pointed out those Wago wire nuts, and I'd used the earlier version of those.
That was John.
Oh, that's why I said I want to give John credit.
You said Jeremy.
Oh, did I?
He did?
Yeah.
It's John.
I thought they were Wago.
Vago.
Oh, what is it?
Vago.
Get it like let the redneck get it right for you. Vago.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
So I had bought the earlier version of those things several years ago and used them here and there. And I didn't know there was a new version. And when you talked about it on your show, I looked them up and I thought, oh, man, those are even better. And so I bought a boatload of them and I used them in some radio projects. And I think those are just a winner. That's a little treasure. So that was a great find. The other thing that was a rather pleasant surprise was getting a Shark RF open spot. And I've used a number of hotspots like Raspberry Pis and the like for D-Star hotspots and DV dongles and DVAPs and such, but I hadn't played around with that. And the reason I got it was Jeremy cajoled me into getting a DMR radio. And so, of course, I had to get a open spot to go with it. And the DMR radio was kind of fun, but I've been using the open spot for DMR and for D-Star. And it's great. It's got a nice web user interface to configure it. It's a nice user interface. Works well. It's a standalone device. You don't need to run it into a PC. If you have an Ethernet jack somewhere, you just plug it in. So that's been a really nice, a pleasant surprise finding that thing.
Cool. Jeremy, what have you found this year?
I think I technically found this last year, actually, when I was at Shelby with my wife for our anniversary, and we, came down to visit you down there. As we were leaving, on the back of this little hatchback was the cutest little disco antenna I had ever seen in my life. I ended up, the guy who owned the car happened to come by before we walked on, and the antenna is a Diamond D220R. And it is they sell it as a mobile scanner antenna. The antenna terminates to a PL259, which is, of course, a very common for the different like lip mounts and hatchback mounts that are sold by Diamond and Comet. That's a very common termination point. But what he was using it for was basically to plug into an RTL SDR dongle and go around and just see what signals there were. So I picked one of these things up here locally from R&L Electronics and have basically fashioned a contraption to mount it to a mounting plate and attach it to a tripod. And it is now my primary receiving antenna for anything above 100 megahertz. It is technically listed as 100 to 100 to 1600 megahertz. But this thing is so much smaller than like a traditional like Diamond D130 discone. So it sells for about $100. So that's been fantastic. Number two, and this was one of my Dayton pickups this year, is we've talked in depth about the popularity of DMR and the Titera MD380 as the $99 gateway drug to DMR. I have really become a big fan of DMR, have a hotspot in here. We have a couple of really good repeaters here in the area that I can hit with an HT. And I decided I wanted something a little bit better than the MD380. So at Dayton this year, a company called Gigaparts is a distributor now for a commercial manufacturer called Hytera, Hytera. They're not Motorola's, but they don't cost anywhere near Motorola's either. But they are, they're commercial, UHF DMR gear. And there is a much higher pain point for programming them as far as like the options that are in the CPS software did take a lot more research and whatnot. But as far as like a rugged, amazingly performant, just quiet, long battery life, like I can't say enough about it. It's not a must buy, but it was a nice to buy, and it is now. Fortunately, my club, our talk around stuff is all UHF. We use UHF repeaters, so I have a bunch of analog frequencies programmed into a couple of zones. I have really enjoyed my Hytera. The model that I have specifically is the 682. Gigapart sells a mobile and like 3 or 4 different handhelds, including this cool little handheld called the 382 that is it's USB rechargeable, and it's only like 2 or 3 watts, and it's perfect for if all you're going to use this for is a hotspot.
Nice, cool stuff.
And then the last thing. And this is something also we've talked about before in terms of software-defined radios, but along with getting this antenna, I really, 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 went hardcore full on into setting up software-defined receivers upstairs in the second floor of my house. And as I've mentioned on the workbench and here, I'm a huge fan of the AirSpy models. I have currently an AirSpy Mini, which is a $99 dongle that'll do 24 megahertz to 1.5 or 1.6 or maybe 1.8 gigahertz. I can't remember. It'll give you 4.8 megahertz of bandwidth in your Spectrum display. But it is such a quality piece of equipment, wide bandwidth, and is the perfect $99 gateway drug into software-defined radios. So that continues to be at the top of my list, especially with all of the software stuff that the developer has done this year to allow remote monitoring and remote management of these dongles. I won't bore you with those details. Check out the workbench because I've talked in depth about all of these, and we're actually looking at having Yusuf come on to talk about AirSpy and SDR Sharp in depth. So again, SDR stuff is just a lot of fun.
Cool. Well, I hate DMR radio, and no offense to anybody that loves it, but I just can't stand to listen to it. It just, for whatever reason, I never turn mine on because it makes my skin crawl, and that's my CSI and the TYT. So I don't know what it's a ear thing, I guess. As you guys have been talking, I've been trying to figure out, wow, what if I can't think of anything. So sorry. There's not a whole lot of new stuff hanging around here. But I do have a TS-850 if anyone's interested, by the way. We can give me something to talk about next year. But if I do have to say one thing, and I've got actually I sold my DMR radio and a couple other things this year, but I did wind up with an Alinco. This is so funny. I wound up with an Alinco DR135. You heard Kenneth talk about these radios a couple of times, and I guess it's really the only thing new around here to talk about. I found it. A guy bought it at Dayton and didn't like it for whatever reason. I bought it and brought it here in the shack, and I've got it connected to the an older Cantronics KPC3 Non-Plus that I've actually got working on Packet right now. I'm really excited that this is happening in my shack. But this radio is so impressive to me simply because I think my 6-year-old daughter could come up here and figure out how to make it work and do what she wanted it to do. And with the advent of all the technology that we enjoy, a lot of it, and we've talked about it here and there throughout the show, is how it can be overwhelming at times, and there's so many buttons to press and things to do. But this Alinco radio, and I'm a big fan of my Kenwood TM281s. Matter of fact, I've got a handful of those. But this Alinco, for what it is the most stupid simple radio I've ever touched, and I'm leaving it on, running it all the time, no problems with it at all. And I think that's what it's intended to do. But I've really been excited about that. How just simple it is to use. My Uniden Trunk Tracker 5 is not simple to use, but this Alinco radio is very simple, and I'm still excited about it, and it's working flawlessly for me right now. I can't think of anything else. I apologize to be so boring, but I'm on break, so give me a break, right?
But, Cale, I would underscore one of the points you're making there, which is that a simple-to-use radio could actually be one of the biggest features. Yeah. So I have one of these old Kenwood single band mobiles. It's a TM, I don't know, 4 something or another, and there is no menu. There's only a row of like 5 buttons on it, and there's a function that gives you another function for each of those 5 buttons. Mm-hmm. And the buttons are shift, tone. It's the most basic features, and I actually really love the radio because it's so simple. And
I got one of those for sale too, by the way.
Do you really?
I do. It's a 231. It's not a 431. It's a 231. But go ahead. Sorry.
No, I'm just saying that depending on what you're doing with the radio, that could be the thing to look for. Honestly, the one of the best uses of those kind of radios is in an MCOM environment. In an MCOM environment, when bad things are happening, you tend to get tunnel vision, and things that are complicated are easily forgotten in the heat of the moment. And I think radios like that really are the best kind of radios to have. Why is it that commercial radios are even simpler, aside from the fact that people that use them are not radio people? It's because all you can handle is volume and channel when bad things are happening. And so I think there's a big psychological consideration. So if you want a radio for your public service events, you want a simple radio. You don't want to be sitting there going, man, I knew that there's a button to press somewhere. It's Jeremy's menu item 432.
Yeah.
I think that's where the PL is.
Another thing about this radio, I'm just sitting here as you're talking, looking across the shack because I'm 6, 8, 10 feet away. I can read the display from here. The display is so big and so bright, I'm across the room and can read it. Now, you won't want to leave this on in your shack and try to sleep in there. But, you can sit across the room. And to me, my most favorite radio is a 2-band or a 2-meter single-band handheld. You should expect a whole lot from Kale, right? But this radio is just the most simple thing ever, and it should be. There should be options like that for someone who doesn't need anything but 50 watts and a microphone. So that's what I stumbled into this year, and I've got a Mini, by the way. I've used it some. The AirSpy Mini with some ADSB stuff works great, and I need to get back into that. But the Alinco DR135, Kenneth convinced me to buy one when I found it on the QTH swap page. It was a good deal. I bought it, and I'm glad I did. So thank you guys for all of that. We've talked some budget-friendly stuff. Because there's people listening that are like, how do y'all have so many radios? I got friends of mine. God, dude, you got 11 VHF radios. I'm like, well, I've been a ham for 6 years, and I've been trying to build an APRS and a packet network both. So I've accumulated. That's why I'm cleaning some stuff out. But, not everybody can do all this stuff. And a lot of people can get discouraged when they hear us talk about, well, I'll get my KX3 to do this, and I'll get my KX2 to do that. But you don't start there. Most people don't. So are there any good budget-friendly ideas for somebody coming, whether from the bottom to the top, no Chinese Handi-talkies included in the conversation, but anything past that you're looking for that are a good budget-conscious buy for someone maybe who has 5 kids, or maybe they're already working 2 jobs and putting a kid through college? And
I think...
Go ahead.
I think that's where you really need to start hitting the swap meets. Like my secondary radio is the ICOM V8000, and once again, it's a 2-meter only, 65 watt output, but that's a brick. And like you talked about, that's fairly easy to use. I don't keep a manual around. I don't use it that often, except when I need a secondary radio or need the extra power for very remote operations. But my father picked one of those up at a local swap meet for $10.
Wow.
So I don't know if it's because it's not dual band, people discount it. So there's, like I said, the swap meets, there are finds like that out there.
Yeah.
So maybe if you are, in the getting started and not really sure what you want, once again, always buyer beware for online purchases, but hitting up local swap meets or making that trip to Dayton with a purpose of going out to the mud pits and seeing what you can find out there.
Yeah. What about you, Jeremy?
Well, I mentioned a couple of what were really top shelf radios in their time that can be had now. I mean, the 92 the IC 92AD that I mentioned, if memory serves, it was like $489 to get started, and now it can routinely be had for under $200. The 706 Mark II-G is still a fantastic HF radio. As far as VHF radios, being able to find, Yaesu 8800s, I think are going to start going down in price. Finding even we mentioned the 7900, but even the 7800, which is relatively close to the same thing as the 7900. And I think really the key to this is that you can still have a lot of enjoyment, and you can go the low cost way either by looking at a lot of the Chinese options that are coming to our shores that we mentioned, and anything other than Baofeng maybe, but then also this is where knowing folks in your club who have experience with older equipment, like the 231 431 conversation that George and Cale just had. Like, I have no idea what those radios are, but I know if I were in a pinch and needed something, I would go to them and say, hey, what's something that's a little bit older that I could get into and not have to worry about, and they would tell me. And so that's where your relationships and your Elmers can really come to the rescue.
Boy, is that not the best? Some of the best advice you could give is that Elmer, because they've already seen the past history of a product. And they can. In matter of fact, let me tell you how I came into the TM231 family. Was an Elmer of mine in 9LPT had one. He said, "I don't need this. Do you want to buy it?" I said, "Sure." I think it's I can't remember what it was now, but it was a really good deal. And he said, "These are really good radios." And another guy standing there with him was like, "Yes, those are very good radios. These guys know what they're talking about. I mean, the radio's 25 years old, right? It's got tones in it, but not much more." And I've had I might have had 5 or 6 over the time, and I've whittled it down. I've got 1 or 2 left now. But the thing is they're really solid, good, just 2-meter rigs, and that's all they do, and that's all that you may need them to do. So the Elmer having that experience, they can also say, that really wasn't a great radio back in the day. You may want to reconsider, and that can end up saving you more money than you think that you're saving on the front end. So that's a very good point, and it's something I think we sometimes forget to think down that road. But having someone to help you make that decision, and of course, this will sound funny to some people. It won't surprise others. I know you guys get them, and I get questions a lot too. What do you think about X? What do you think about Y? Not that we're people's Elmers, but they do trust our opinions and hope that we can offer some further insight into their decisions, which is the entire reason we've done this program today. So, I hope that everyone's enjoyed this. And before we go, Jeremy's favorite part of this show is talking about stocking stuffers. I think he's got a list, so we're going to let him get started first, and then we'll just go to George and John and with any types of stocking stuffers for us as we wind down the Super Gashamati Special Edition, show number 4 for the Shopping Ham Radio 360 podcast. Go ahead, Jeremy.
So I'm going to repeat myself. Number 1, first and foremost, power poles.
Power pole the hashtag. Power pole the world.
You can't power pole the world if you don't have enough power poles. Power poles, RF adapters, small jumper cables of varying kinds, things that help you work on coax or to build your own cables, crimp tools for power poles. I mean, all of that kind of like secondary, bits and bobs, pieces and parts kind of stuff that go along with this hobby are always good. A couple of other things I'll add is I've already mentioned all of these in one capacity or another, but they're all right around the $100 mark. Again, the AirSpy Mini for somebody who wants to get into software-defined radios and wants to get a quality piece of equipment, that's there at $99. The Titera MD380 for somebody who wants to dip their toe in the DMR waters, or somebody who is interested in setting up a hotspot board, which again we've talked about in previous episodes. It's basically a device that allows you to connect, via RF from your radio to this little box, the hotspot, and then to the internet in case you don't have a repeater nearby, and allows you to talk on the internet linked systems that are out there. But the Titera MD380 for well under $100 is a fantastic buy of a radio. And then, I mentioned that MD8600, the 25-20 watt dual bander, that's about $100. Having a mobile radio in your stocking would have been unheard of 2 years ago.
Yeah, for $100.
Yeah.
And it would fit in your stocking.
Yeah, it would.
Both ways. Yeah. Good points. George, what you got?
Oh, gosh. The first thing that I would suggest is a copy of the ARRL handbook. And everybody really should have a copy of it. It's the sort of thing that you'll reference in so many different ways. antennas, for power supplies, for radios, just, basic electronics. It's just such a valuable thing to have. And it's not that terribly cheap. I'm not sure how much they are now, but they're probably $40 or $50 or something like that. So it's one of those things where you go, well, that's kind of an expensive book. And then when you get one for Christmas, it's like, oh, this is awesome. And you'll have an infinite source of bathroom reading material.
So too much information there.
That'd be my first pick. I think my second pick would be a collection of stuff that is a Raspberry Pi, an audio codec, audio fob, and for the first time ever, I will recommend and a Bofang radio. Maybe even the cheapest one, the Model 888, which is a channelized radio that's only like $13. Why? Because with that little pile of stuff, you could build an all-star hotspot and start playing around with the voice over IP connected radio. And that's pretty much all you need to take your common garden variety FM radio and talk to this little hotspot. So when we talk about things like the Shark Open Spot, that's $230, and it supports all the digital modes. You could build your own hotspot on the All-Star Network for about $70, if not less.
Can we interface my repeater with that?
Yes. Yeah. If you have a port, like on the controller, the Sierra radio controller you got, on the spare port, you could take the Raspberry Pi and the codec and forget the Bofang, and you could interface that to the controller.
We have a brand new, we got rid of Charter there. We have a brand new Uverse connection at the station. So that might be a future Workbench project episode. That would be interesting for all of us.
Funny you should mention it, because one of the build projects I've got in mind to work on in the first part of 2018 is a little combo repeater controller or all-star hotspot board set. So
ta-da! We could do that. We could all talk together, and we could also talk to our buddy in Israel.
Exactly. We could get Eric on the horn. Yeah, that'd be totally awesome.
All right. So seriously, let's talk about that between now and the next time we talk. So
I'm in.
Yeah. John, man, I tell you, I'm digging the camper top you put on the back of the truck, or whatever you're supposed to call that. I like the way that looks, and I'm actually getting ready to sell my truck, so I'm not going to do that to mine. But I'm encouraged to see all the LED lights in there and everything. But I've got to ask you, what are some stocking stuffers besides LED lights that the Field Radio Podcast guy would encourage his listeners to pick up this year?
So I started a list when we started talking, and I think I'm up to almost a page and a half. So
Energizer Bunny.
So here comes the rundown. But yeah, that camper top, that was a great local classifieds ad, and
nice.
And I've got solar panels on top and LED lights all the way around, and so I'll be doing a show on that, on how to turn your truck into a large go kit. So here's your lightning round of stuff that I've found, all under $100. So let's go through really quickly with antennas. We've always talked about this, and I think it's been mentioned on the show, the N9 Tax roll up. I mean, $20 to $30. You're not going to find a better. Every unit's tuned, and just a great portable roll-up antenna. Amazingly enough, for if you're looking for a mag mount, you go to Walmart and buy. It's only online, but the Browning BR1035 is $25. That's a dual band antenna, and then the BR180 is the mag for that. The mag mount. So $50, you got an excellent mobile antenna. I'm really impressed with Arrow, their J-pole antenna, $59. Arrow, I tell you, I bought this thing 5 years ago, and I lost the little tiny screw that fits between the two, because if you get one that's cut in half, the J-pole, so you can pack it. emailed him and said, hey, I can't find this. And I've actually done this with the other Arrow antenna. And the guy just sends you stuff. He's like, oh, yeah, I'll send you that part. And so Arrow antennas, I really appreciate their support. But yeah, J-pole antenna, which is just a rock solid antenna when you're talking about going in the field for VHF, UHF. Of course, we can't not mention the Pac-10 Mini. I mean, $90.
I know that
best, the best antenna you're going to get for field portable. Just throw that thing up in a tree with an arbor's weight and some rope, and you're on the air. Just amazing. And then last for antennas, signal stuff. They were on the Dayton show, KD7 BBC, Richard Bateman with hamstudy.org. He was interviewed on the Dayton show. Signal stuff, that's that little antenna that's made out of that really tight wire. $20, and it's a high performing antenna for your HT. I just texted him while we were on the recording here, and he is doing a 25% off starting Thanksgiving and going through Cyber Monday. So that'll save you some on that, and so that'll bring it down off to $20. And he offers a lifetime warranty on those. So even if you break them due to damage, due to whatever, you just contact him, send it back, and he'll ship you a new one. So that's kind of my rundown on antennas. The last couple cheap things is I've really been liking, you talk about LED lights. Goal Zero has 2 sets of lights. Light a Life Mini. This is a USB light that's only $20 a light, and they're chainable. And I've tested these. They don't have RF hash on them, but they're also their Goal Zero Luna light, and that's just a little USB stick light. It's meant to light up your keyboard. $6, and you plug that into your Go box, and you can light up your radios. You can light up whatever you need. I use it in the car to kind of give a night light. So just some little tiny things. But let's see what else. Oh, and lastly, you wouldn't expect, when you hear the word Heil, you wouldn't expect something to come cheap. But interestingly enough, their Heil Sound has a HT headset, single ear headset, that's pinned out for either Yaesu, ICOM, or Kenwood. $28 for a really good HT headset. If you're looking at working events or using your HT in the field, that little headset's just a great find for that price.
Excellent. Well, I don't have a whole lot to add to any of that, but I will tell you that I do have the signal stuff antenna, George, on the Oshin Handy that's my go-to grab type radio, and it really, man, it makes a huge difference. Of course, now it's longer than the typical antenna, but down here in the country, that makes a big difference, and it works really, really well. So we'll make sure we link that, and you guys showed him some love back after Dayton, and hope you will do that as well, especially folks like George, who's out there doing it big with the Pac-10 Mini. So pick up one of those. If you guys are operating in the field, HF, portable, and you don't have a Pac-10 yet, you're really missing out. So don't keep missing. Just get her done. I shop for kids. I don't really know. And this year's going to be a really different Christmas around here anyway, too. So I'm not. My wife told me last night. Let me just be very transparent, like I'm not always transparent. But my wife told me last night, I'm so tired of you taking the joy out of holidays. Last night I was complaining about having to cook all this food that I'm really not going to have to cook on Thanksgiving, but the holidays just wear me out for some reason. I don't know why. I'm not a big fan, but anyway, there's a lot of cool things out there to be had. Again, I'll go back to George, the Raspberry Pi thing. I'm wanting to build a Field Expedient type portable computer to do FL Digi on. So I'm thinking for me it would be a Raspberry Pi 3, the official 7-inch display, and the little $12 case that holds the screen, the Pi, and everything together, and get somebody smarter than me to help me figure out how to write a image for FL Digi and some cool ham stuff, and that would probably make me real happy. And that's on my wish list, by the way, because the real Johnny mentioned in his blog post the other day that we should have wish lists, so I spent all morning trying to figure out what to put on mine, and I didn't realize I didn't need as much as I thought I wanted. So you never know. You never know. So, wow. I don't think it's been 4 hours, but we have been here a while. So I want to say a big thank you to George and Jeremy and John for coming and spending time with us here together on this special edition of the Ham Radio 360 podcast. And wish everyone listening a very happy Thanksgiving and a very merry upcoming Christmas. But gentlemen, thank you all. Before we go, it's hard to kind of end these things sometimes, and I don't want to go too quick, but is there anything that we might have forgotten that it just hit you here that you wanted to get out to the audience before we go, or do you just want to tip your hat and say goodnight and keep going on with the life at the house? How about Jeremy?
I want to say it's been great to hear you again.
Has my voice changed? Have I gone through puberty yet?
Yeah, you've gone soft in your break here. No, all joking aside, it's been great to get everybody together. I always look forward to these touch bases every year. It's hard to believe that this. You said this will be our fourth one.
Yeah.
That's pretty awesome. No, I would say that no matter what Santa brings you or you get for yourself, etc., make sure to practice ham radio safely, and everybody have a fantastic holiday. Enjoy the fellowship and the family and the food and the other things that this season brings about for us, and we'll catch you in the new year.
Yeah.
Thanks. Or next week if you're a Workbench listener.
Yeah. Well, no, it'll be a week after next.
But
this is, unless they're listening, like binge listening, and it'll be in a few hours.
It might be in 10 minutes. Yeah.
It could be tomorrow.
Podcasting's hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening. See you next time. Go ahead, George.
Oh, I don't think I have anything to add to the list. I echo what Jeremy said, and I'm really looking forward to what's going to come down the pipe next year. I think there's a lot of really great topics. When we first started talking about the Workbench podcast, we were trying to figure out how in the world we'd do 6 episodes, and we're up to like 37. And there's more things that we can think about talking about. And I'm just excited about John's podcast, and I'm just really grateful that you guys are around, that I have a chance to learn from you and share things and hang out from time to time. So this has really been fun. I hope we get to do this together again some more this year.
Well, it's been cool, man, and it's actually going to be 38, but they don't have to know that yet. But it's close. It's 37, 38. It's just how you look at it, I guess. You know how I know stuff like that?
No.
I had to change it this morning.
You think I would know?
Yeah, well, if you'd asked me tomorrow, I couldn't tell you. But, so congratulations on that, by the way. I mean, that's, if you're not a content creator, and most of you aren't, you don't realize the amount of work that it took to get to 37, to 7, to 12, to whatever. It's a lot going on. So congratulations, guys. Y'all are killing it. Keep up the good work. And John, before we go, anything else for us, bro?
Well, I feel like the new kid on the block. This is my first.
In KTOB.
So thank you for welcoming me into the 360 family.
Absolutely.
I'm 10 episodes down. So, and I joke because someone did ask me, did I take Cal out?
He's bigger than me.
The minute I start, you go on hiatus, and so I say, no, I promise I didn't. Yes. So, no, I appreciate being here, and this has been great, and I'm looking forward to continuing on. We're going to try and do some dating plans also, and I think it's just going to be fun, and it's interesting to talk to different people that have come forward and volunteered to be on the show, and just finding out all the amazing things you can do in this hobby that is just great to hear people's story, and it's great to hear people getting out and getting things and just enjoying this hobby. So I appreciate you letting me be part of this.
Oh, absolutely, man. Absolutely. And thank you very much, everyone, for listening. It's been a lot of fun. We hope you've enjoyed it. This is our 4th shopping show, so if you haven't heard the others, we will encourage you to go back. The easiest way to find it, there's 2 easy ways. Type in shopping into the search bar, hamradio360.com, or you can go to the Start Here page, and we'll have them all listed in order there. So if you're just coming into the hobby, you're brand new, somebody handed you this thing to listen to, start here at hamradio360.com. and it kind of goes through the steps of how to become a ham, what to buy, what not to buy, what we'd encourage you to buy, what we'd encourage you to stay away from. So with that, we're going to let the music close us out here and say thank you again. Happy Thanksgiving, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and we'll see you. Kel will see you in the new year. God bless you guys. Thank you so much for listening. 73, y'all.